Before we continue this series, I want to talk more about the Monk and its in-game class features. This is a follow-up to what I introduced last episode. If you'd like to see more action instead of game mechanics talk, skip to the next part of the series, where I delve into the Temple of Ba despite having sided with the Necromancers. Now, the last time I played Might Magic 7, until this series, was early 2009. Since then, I've gotten smarter about how I play video games, and I also know more about this game. That's partly thanks to code diving, partly thanks to viewer interaction, where I'm asked questions and have to dredge up knowledge from the recesses of my mind. That's partly thanks to experimentation I've done between episodes. But for this topic, I have primarily Greyface to thank. Well, Greyface created a bug fix feature patch for Might and Magic 7 that I'm not using. They also cataloged some game mechanics you might not otherwise know onto one convenient page. Pertinent to this video, weapon recovery times. I'm not going to pull up the reference material itself on this video, in part because the page itself, if you don't know anything about the game, and what will happen later on in the story, it'll spoil you about. So I won't pull it up. But I will link to it in the video description if you are interested in dipping into that. There's some things on there that I knew, and there's some things that I didn't. I ended up finding the page, a brief tangent to this, because you may recall at the start of the series, I mentioned that I knew vaguely how resistances work, but I didn't really know. And just by looking for information, I ended up stumbling across that. And then I understood how resistances worked in the game. But to specifically this, I'll reference a comment from Lethal Feline and my reply to it, providing some actual crunch. In a vacuum, with only unarmed, the recovery time is 60 units, we'll call it ticks. That's tied with the dagger, for being, in the grand scheme of things, that's really damn quick. With only staff, the recovery time is 100 ticks, which is tied with the bow and the axe for being the slowest. The lowest recovery time can be for either weapon is 30 ticks, and that's true for most weapons in the game. Now, Flail Fist has an effective Arms Master skill of 12. Arms Master Master 7, and while you don't get the skill added to damage of all melee weapons for unarmed, which is now translated to using a staff because of that glitch, the skill still reduces the recovery time of all melee weapons and still adds to the attack bonus of all melee weapons. This Royal Leather here adds +5 Arms Master skill, and you can see the adjustment there accordingly. So, we've got 12 Arms Master floating around. That adjusts unarmed skill for Flail Fist to 48, and it adjusts the usage of a staff to 88. There's still a sizable speed difference there. The next thing we have to reflect on are haste potions, which I have made more than any other potion in this game. Now, I knew mechanically that those did adjust speed, but I didn't know by how much specifically. Greyface notes that a haste effect will adjust recovery time by 25, as in subtract that. So, back to ye old comet here, that I left for Lethal. This reduces unarmed recovery time to 30, because that's the minimum, and staff recovery time goes down to 63. The next thing to consider is something that Princess J2, our druid, is perfectly capable of making, as would be a sorcerer if you had them in your party. And that is a Swift potion, which adds the of Swiftness property to a non-magic weapon. If, say, you have a non-magic weapon, or a magic weapon that's already Swift, either due to having like a Swift Wizard Staff or a Wizard Staff of Darkness, your weapon will recover quicker, like how the Swift Mighty Halberd does. And since I actually did end up enchanting the Swift Mighty Halberd through our druid here, I could save and load enough times to land in a Swift Wizard Staff, Or I could go looking for one, probably in Nion's weapon shop. I couldn't get a Wizard Staff of Darkness, though. I'm pretty sure that's a Grandmaster enchant item effect to put on a weapon. Anyway, according to the Crunch, a Swift effect subtracts 20 from recovery time. Now, you can't pour that potion on your fists. Unarmed can't benefit from it at all, but even if it could, unarmed recovery time is already 30, so it wouldn't even have matter, whereas staff recovery time is reduced to 43. Now, initially in that comment, I then say that the only way to further reduce staff recovery time would be by increasing Arms Master. However, something I left off in that calculation was speed. Speed reduces recovery time, and Greyface notes that basically for every, bonus, every +1 of speed you have, that translates into -1 recovery time. Flailfist has a speed of 75, which translates to a +10 modifier, which means -10 recovery time. That means that, take away the Haste Potion and the Swift effect. Just look at Arms Master. Instead of unarmed being 48, it's actually 38, which means the Haste Potion is not that much of a benefit. And Staff is also 10 points lower too, which means that with a Haste Potion and a Swift Potion, attacking with a Staff is not 43, it's 33. A marginal difference there. Now, if we add an extra, +3 bonus to, Flailfist's speed modifier, which we would get from another 75 points of speed, we would add an extra... we would basically shave off another 3 recovery points, which means that attacking with the staff would then become just as fast as attacking unarmed. Let's see whether that's true. Quaff a speed potion. Imbue that with a Swift effect. And then quaff the Haste Potion, too. Okay. If there is a difference there, it is so small that I cannot perceive it. Now, this requires a little bit more maintenance to consume a Haste Potion, which we do normally anyway, but then put a Swift Potion on top of the staff, and then to also consume a Speed Potion as well if I want to make sure the staff attacks just as fast as unarmed does. However, it is obtainable, and it is not obnoxiously difficult to do so. Which means that only aggravation we have to consider is that Arms Master Master doesn't apply. Whenever Staff becomes Grand instead of Master, it no longer adds its damage. This is something that Greyface's latest, 2.1 or whatever, fixes. Has been tinkering with that. It's possible that I may attempt to delve into the code myself to try and target that specific narrow instance, but I doubt it. So yeah, there you go. Now, another question I ended up having is, okay, so I can make the attack with a staff just as fast as the attack with unarmed, and it's not horrifically inconvenient to do so at this point in the game. You know, when my character's level 48, and we have gobs of skill points, we have a number of attributes. Alright. My next question then is whether that was a worthwhile 54 skill point investment. Keep in mind, it took 54 skill points for me to raise staff from 1 to 10. And, you know, the trainers, that's a minor thing. Whatever, whoop-de-doo. We have plenty of cash. Not an issue. But the 54 skill points are more valuable. Would I have been better served by placing them in unarmed instead? Now, you could imagine a world where eventually it becomes so cost-prohibitive to raise unarmed that, staff just ends up being a more convenient way of adding damage. But at what point does that become true? Is it true at 10s? So, let's spend 50 skill points raising unarmed to 14. We're looking at a damage output of 64 to 66. If I load the save where we started this, Flailfist damage is 64 to 70. That's a marginal difference, but that is a positive difference. Of course, we're using a wizard staff. I think the only staff more powerful in this game is an artifact staff, or it may be technically labeled as a relic. Regardless, we wouldn't be able to enchant it with a swift effect, but it would technically do a bit more damage and have a bit more attack bonus. So yeah, even at the skill levels of 10, it's worthwhile to do the detour to increase staff, and then afterwards you can increase unarmed. So, a little bit of extra damage. Of course, you won't be able to enchant this weapon without forfeiting the swift bonus. You know, you can't add like a fire aura to it, or do like any other like damage boosting thing, so long as you want to be able to attack just as fast as you can while you can unarmed. You could find an item that provides a higher bonus to Arms Master, or vastly increase your speed. Because those are the only two ways you're reducing recovery time here. You can't do it through increasing unarmed. That just gives you attack bonus and damage. You can't do it through staff, because that doesn't give you anything of the sort either. So your only other way of your only two ways of reducing recovery time from this point are higher Arms Master and higher speed. And with the diminishing returns on increasing your speed attribute, you know, like even if we remove the Titan's Belt, for instance, that's only minus 40 speed. It's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, based on like crunching the numbers here, I have a, you know, slightly better opinion of the monk. While I thought they were entertaining and fun to use, the fact that, well, you can end up attacking with the staff just as fast as unarmed. It doesn't make that much of a difference, but it's still a positive thing. It's not the worst thing ever. That's kind of cool. And then we can end up spending skill points into unarmed, and we get double attack bonus and double damage, and I would see the rest of the skill points going there. Now, does that mean that Flailfist the Monk could keep up in damage with a Thief or a Knight? Perhaps that's something we end up exploring in the second playthrough. I did say I'd do 2 playthroughs of this game, showing off 8 of the 9 classes, and Knight and Thief are not among those classes, and they're the other 2 heavy hitters. Anyway, that pretty much takes care of this side. Just wanted to share that bit. And I thought it was worthwhile enough to do this in its own separate video, a sidebar, if you will, before we continue the rest of the series. Hope you enjoyed the crunch, and if you want to explore more of it, and don't mind a possible spoiler about what we'll end up seeing in the future, go ahead and check out the link in the video description. I'll talk to you folks later. Oh, right, one more thing. Ended up forgetting about this during the video, but I was curious about this as well, and in that comment chain I had with Lethal, MSYTB asked about this too. And this is not something I know the answer to. How does the spell Hammer Hands work with the staff? Since the staff uses the unarmed skill, it counts as an unarmed attack, right? Which means that, in theory, it would benefit from using Hammer Hands. But I can't swear to that. I don't know. My best, I would have to, scrutinize, damage numbers in fighting enemies to determine that. Because it's not going to show up here. And short beats me. I'd like to say yes, but I'm not entirely certain. Oh well. Can't hurt to cast, it's not that big of a deal.